podcast alone.
I'm your, tasty soundtrack is really the most important part of these things, host Madelyn.
I'm your meme deck host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning into this week's show. It's my side quest, so I get to choose what we talk about. I get to choose what you listen to. And what I chose this week is card games in games.
Yes.
At Emma's insistence, just kidding, we are mostly talking this week about card games within a game. I will give the requisite opening shout out to there are many games that are themselves card games.
Yeah.
So, of course, big shout out to Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories.
There's actually two categories here. There's games where the cards are the aesthetic. Although, Chain of Memories is kind of a card game.
Chain of Memories is
kind
of
of just
both.
Aesthetically.
Yeah.
And then ones
not
that
if you're playing
like,
it, to be clear, Chain of Memories is not a card game if you're playing it as like a 9-year-old.
Sure.
But it's a card game if you intend to finish the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, so shout out to, Slay the Spire. Shout out to Neon White, I guess.
Slay the Spire 2 just came out last week, so
was not inspired by.
Yeah.
That's a game that I should not. I think I own Slay the Spire. It's probably a game I should not touch.
Probably.
Speaking of, shout out to Balatro, which itself is an example of what we will come to learn is it's really important that your card game have a banging little theme.
Yeah.
And does Balatro have a banging theme? Like, no, but yes. Anyway, shout out to all these games, to the, very popular genre of deck builder. Shout out to games that look like... I just read about a game that's like a cross between Slay the Spire and Vampire Survivors.
You mean the one that the Vampire Survivors dev made?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Great.
It's like
even
Vampire
better.
Crawlers, I think.
Yeah, that makes it even scarier to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shout out to, Dangerous Solitaire? That's not what it's called.
It is something like Dangerous Solitaire, though.
I know,
yeah.
and I'm pretty sure it's close. I don't remember what the actual adjective at the front is, but yeah, it's not spooky solitaire. I'd remember that. But whatever. Adjective solitaire. Cards are in.
Have been. For a while.
Wait, it's cards? Always has been.
Man, do kids still have, card decks?
That's a perfect segue into what I was going to say next, which is apparently I read an article a few months ago. They've
you brought
banned
this up at some point.
What?
I think. You brought this article up at some point.
Yeah, well, I'm going to bring it up again.
Okay.
I love to be. I read an article. They banned cell phones in New York City schools this year, which has apparently led to a resurgence in card games.
Good.
So yeah, cards are in. Cards 2026.
Because definitely high school was the time in which I played the most concentrated amount of traditional card games.
You know what? I take that back. I winced at that because I was like, I didn't play nearly as much Rat Race or kind of like cardy, kids card games. Not that, whatever. No, the Rat Race one is one where you're slapping each other's hands.
Yeah, I think so.
But you're right that I did play so much Hearts in junior year choir, and also a decent amount of Spades in some summer camp stuff. So you are right that high school was my most concentrated card playing time, but I was going to push back and be like, I don't know, probably late elementary, middle school. No, you're right. It was high school.
That's fair. It did do a lot of that then, too.
But yeah, card games, unless you get really into poker, I guess, do kind of go away as an adult. Maybe I should start a poker night.
Then again, is that a thing caused by age, or is that a thing caused by the changing times?
It's a great question.
I think they played more card games as adults back in the 20s,
Well, if only Square Enix would release any of their card games with an official set, perhaps the world would heal.
Yeah, it's true.
So anyway, we're not talking about games that are primarily about cards. We are not talking about actual physical card games.
Yeah.
We are instead talking about games that have card games in them.
Yes. Which does have some overlap with those two genres.
Of course. Yes, some of these games have gone on to be actual physical card games. Some of these games have gone on to be games in their own right.
Yes.
Etc.
Mostly Gwent.
Mostly Gwent. Again, because, so to seg into the actual episode here, the undisputed champion of card games in games is Square Enix. I saw, where was there some article?
That's not what Gwent is from.
That's correct. That's why I was saying, the reason that Gwent is sorry, I didn't really finish my thought. The undisputed champion of card games and games is Square Enix, and because
they don't make the physical ones.
That's correct.
Gwent stands out as having the physical ones. I understand the train of thought now. Yeah.
Thank you for following. And yeah, my suspicion is that CD Projekt Red poached someone from Square Enix to make their card game. Just kidding. That's not how it happened. It's really funny how many of these like incredibly iconic, beloved card things are like, oh, one guy wanted to do this, and we said, all right, buddy, just get the rest of your work done.
Yeah.
That's the whole story of Gwent. Triple Triad sounds like it's kind of that way too. They were like, oh, one guy can do this. And I told him to. So
yeah,
he did. Anyway, Square Enix has 2 iconic card games and 1 bad one. From what it seems. Yeah. So Emma and I, got very into it. I'm sure you can go back and find the podcast episode evidence of this. Got very into Queen's Blood. Which is from Final Fantasy Rebirth, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the most recent of the Final Fantasy VII Res, which was also the best part of the Final Fantasy VII Orchestra concert.
True.
Now you might be thinking, no, it was the 3rd time they played One Winged Angel, but no, it was not. There was no more electric moment for the crowd than when they started playing the Queen's Blood, like tasty little intro.
You know what? Listen, to their credit, they knew too.
Yeah, they did. I really like this comment from I think it was from a Eurogamer article about Queen's Blood from BCDC Dude, who says, Queen's Blood was horribly addictive, but after a while I had to play it on mute. The music is incredible, but I spent many nights having the theme lodged in my brain trying to sleep. Which is going to be me tonight. So
I mean, the whole theme is great, but I think what really sells it is when you're setting up your cards, like choosing which ones to mulligan or whatever at the beginning. There's this like nice, light, jazzy piano playing, right? To sort of compliment you. And then as soon as you hit start, no matter what part of the music it was in, it immediately transitions to these big, huge trumpets.
Yeah.
To get you started before it goes into the rest of the theme. And like, that's it, It's
awesome when a non-electronic piece of music has a drop.
Yeah, exactly.
And Queen's Blood's got a really good drop.
It does.
And it's this week is not about soundtrack, although again, I will say any one of these, like the thing with a card game mini game, right, is the player is going to be playing a lot of it, and well, theoretically, if it's good, right, the player is going to be playing it a fair bit. You probably want to have the same recognizable theme for it all the time. And it's got to be something that the player is both going to want to listen to a lot and might be listening to for like either a short or a long amount of time, depending on how good they are at the game or their play style. So that's a really interesting composing challenge. And of course, that's a composing challenge that stretches across a lot of games.
I mean, it's similar to battle music in that way.
Sure.
Because it is a battle in some ways.
Correct. So anyway, it does seem like if you're going to design one of these games for a card game within a game, well, one, you could take the Red Dead Redemption route, which is to just include poker in your game. Poker, as per Red Dead fandom, Blackjack.com. Poker is a type of card game traditionally associated with betting and gambling.
True.
I will circle back to that one a little bit because I think that the ability to cheat in Red Dead is like an interesting thing that it doesn't occur to me that you can't do in many of these other games, but I'll come back to that. But probably before I talk about Queen's Blood, probably the most iconic, maybe Gwent has eclipsed this, but in terms of like the granddaddy of these games, it's definitely Final Fantasy VIII's Triple Triad.
Yeah.
Which is like the beloved old card game that spawned all of these, frankly.
Final Fantasy VIII is my planned Final Fantasy for the year. So
nobody
I'm
likes
excited.
it, Emma.
What?
Nobody likes it.
That's why I'm interested.
Okay,
I liked
cool.
the 13 series, so
That's true.
I'm thinking and I'm gonna like 8.
It's Leon. Just kidding.
But regardless, I'm excited to play Triple Triad.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad for Emma. Got real into Queen's Blood too. Where is the Wikipedia greatest mini games of all time list? Just saying.
That'd be a good list.
It would be a good list, and maybe we should make it. But yes, Triple Triad was for Final Fantasy VIII, although you can now play it in Final Fantasy XIV. Yes, I did mean 14, Emma, thank you. I know how Roman numerals work. I had a typo on my notes.
I was just like, they added it to the Pixel remaster of 4?
No, they didn't.
For
They
some reason.
brought it to Final Fantasy XIV. And it's also on the Final Fantasy Portal mobile game, so you can play it standalone, although nobody likes that.
Yeah.
There is not, notably, there is no official physical deck, which is crazy because, I mean, it'd be one thing if it was like, oh, yeah, like, that's a thing people love from 8, but, like, you know, we haven't done anything with it since then. But it's in Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah.
The free trial up to level 60 or whatever. Like, it's unbelievable that this gigantic fan base game where they already know that people are, like, spending their disposable income on the game. You're telling me that they don't think they can make money off of a physical deck? Especially given, and this was something that was interesting to consider a little bit as I was researching, there are already people who have made these decks, like fan-made decks, that have proven that this is a fun game to play against a human being. That's something that I think is an overlooked potential challenge of bringing some of this stuff to a physical world, is some of these games are probably only fun. Like, I actually don't know if Queen's Blood would be fun against an actual person.
Well, it's also just a matter of, like, some games would be easy to make physical decks for, and some require more setup.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. I feel like we talked about this before with Queen's Blood, and then there was something about it where I was like, this would be hard to actually make physical, but I can't remember exactly what it was.
That sounds familiar to me as well.
Because when it's not physical, you can have certain effects and changes and stuff that would require, like, that happens in a second, that when you're playing with another person might require, like, a sidebar instead.
I mean, the tracking of Queen's Blood has enough, like, oh, this augments the thing, or it highlights that square for you, that it might be challenging to play in a physical realm.
Be a lot more counting on your own.
Which is not a thing that board game players are scared of. So
That's true.
Still could happen. But anyway, Triple Triad is like relatively simple overall. All of these games, like, they've got to be simple so you can continue to build on them, right? So you've got cards, there's a grid, and each of those cards has, like, directional point values, right? So I, might have a card that's like, it's a 7 up, and it's a 9 right, it's a 2 down, and it's a 5 left. And so your goal is always to use those cards to, like, exceed the point value of the opponent's card that's next to it on that side. And if you do that, you capture the card. And then you keep going until the deck is, the 9x9 grid is full. and no one can play anymore, and then there's a winner. And, there's more complicated things that come into play, right? There's like elements to cards eventually. It can get more and more complicated, but that's kind of like the simple idea. And so Triple Triad is both cool because it is like a fun card game, right? That's a baseline. But it's also like very iconic for Final Fantasy VIII because it's totally integrated into the world. Like almost literally everyone that you can encounter in that game will play Triple Triad with you. And they will play Triple Triad with you regardless of what is going on in the world at that point. Which, is that realistic or is that unrealistic? I think it's realistic.
I think it's realistic.
Yeah. I think it's unfortunate that we don't have something like that.
Yeah, maybe it's unrealistic that everybody is like, yeah, we know the same card game and we're all really into the same card game, but I do believe card games in general, people just play those,
That's true. But I'm thinking, like, it's interesting to consider, right? Is like, are we living through Final Fantasy VIII during Triple Triad's Pokemon Go moment? Right? We're not. But that would be funny. But what else I think is really cool about like this as a like world building thing or a parallel to the story supporting what's going on in this world thing is that there's like regional rules variations to Triple Triad, which I realize is not like such a weird game thing to be like, oh, you go to a new region and like you have a new ability or whatever. Yeah. But I thought that was cool, like, because that's true, right? That's true of certain types of games. And that's like a cool thing to have figured out how to put into a game that, again, one dude made.
Yeah.
They asked like the lead director or whatever about this in a Game Informer article about Final Fantasy VIII, and he was like, "Yep, this is a guy that was in charge of the battle systems, but I told him one day, hey, why don't you make a card game?" And he did.
I mean, I think if you're in charge of the battle systems, you are pretty suitable to make a card game system also.
Yes. But the battle system is a very important part of the game.
Yes. The Final Fantasy VIII, having not played it and having not reminded myself about it, looking into this because it's not about it, the Final Fantasy VIII battle system is very weird, apparently. That's why it's controversial.
Well, maybe this guy would have done a better job if he hadn't put, half of his time into developing the most iconic video game card game of all time.
I didn't say good or bad, just weird.
I'm just kidding. These kinds of games always also kind of create the funny moments. Like there's a good PC gamer that I will quote here of, "I like the idea of Squall outsmarting a small child at this daft card game and then taking his most treasured card away. Final Fantasy VIII would be improved exponentially if you could see the kid's crushed expression and Squall offering a condescending, them's the rules, son. Of course, you take on this kid and end up losing your Ifrit card like I did the first time playing through the game. The salty tears will be entirely your own."
Mm-hmm. It is, I do feel like adding a card game is a good way, like a way to provide character, an interesting vehicle for providing like background on this character, right?
Yeah.
Because you can adjust the way each character plays to say something about them and what they prioritize. Which you can do with any minigame, but right. We're talking about card games here.
Yeah. I liked that Triple Triad was inspired by Magic the Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And it has Shuffle or Boogie is the theme song, which I listened to. Some good clapping elements to that and good title.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has the collectathon element, which is again, a sort of like easy to overlook portion of what is kind of critical about some of this stuff.
Yeah, like we said, we weren't talking about deck builders, but a lot of these card games are about building your deck.
They absolutely are.
And tailoring certain decks to respond to certain types of situations.
Which is another reason why it can be hard for me to think about some of these games translating into real life physical play. Like, one thing that is very that I read about across discussions of several of these games is the challenge of, in developing this, both figuring out the rule set and how it works and what makes it fun, but then how do you scaffold it so you're training the player over time, that they are playing more difficult AI characters over time? How do you make an AI that is going to be like medium level smart at a card game or very smart at a card game without it being, Watson, right? Sure. So that seemed like a very interesting challenge. And it also it makes me think of, okay, in the real world where a player, assuming they have enough disposable income or whatever, can buy enough packs of anything to build their ideal deck, right? Is the game still fun when you're playing against a player with human level intelligence whose deck may not be built for you to be able to strategically find a way to win, right?
I mean, that's kind of the struggle with stuff like Magic the Gathering, of course.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, there's all these types of... We played Pokemon cards.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's not like there aren't deck-building games that exist in the physical realm. You're right that it makes it more complicated of having to introduce cards. And the fact that Magic has had to introduce so many cards and so many rules does make it a rather confusing game sometimes, even for professionals. But that's a game that's been going on for decades, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about that for a little bit, I think.
No, I just, I'm not saying it's impossible to build a game wherein 2 human players can have top level decks and it's still fun to play.
Sure.
But it's interesting to consider something like thinking of Queen's Blood, right? So Queen's Blood, yes, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth game. You have your deck of cards that you're trying to win your row. Basically, there's 3 rows and it's 5 deep, right? It's 15 cards. And you're trying to end up with the most points in your row, and all the cards have various like augmentations, or some of them can like destroy another opponent's card or that kind of thing, right? You're like battling for territory in that way, which all of these games that are successful are really like battling for territory to get the most points. Right?
I did really like what's interesting about Queen's Blood is, in one of the interviews you quoted, they're talking about like, yes, Platoon was kind of helpful.
Yeah.
Because even more than some other card games, I think Queen's Blood is very much about claiming territory for yourself.
Yeah, which Emma told me about at some point in my early playing, and it totally changed how I was thinking about it.
As much as it is about getting the most points for yourself, which is an interesting wrinkle to it, an interesting approach to how you can play it.
So anyway, with any game, I mean, this is true of any game system at all, right? But some systems are not going to have the level of depth that you need to take it from, this is fun when I'm scaffolding against an everly increasing challenge level of AI, right? To, oh, this is fun when like 2 people are playing it.
Sure. And going into the other Square Enix card game, I do think one key part of making a very good card mini game is that it is quite simple.
Yeah.
Real card games, they can get convoluted if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're bad at it first and then get the hang of it. But, poker's pretty convoluted, right? But if you're making like a mini game, it can't be too complicated because you're already doing a bunch of other things in the game. And so this needs to be like something that activates the part of the brain that it needs and not more than that.
Also, in the real world, there are other intrinsic rewards to playing a card game, even if you are struggling and it is difficult. Namely, that you are probably playing it with your human friends or coworkers, or I don't know, I guess someone you met on the street playing Pokemon Go, right?
Sure.
But in a video game, I am just bashing my head against a robot. And not that
to be fair, people like that.
Sure, not that can't be fun, but it's a mini game. I don't know. You have to. It has to be hooky enough that the player wants to take a break from the real game to play it, the quote unquote real game to play it.
Yeah.
And if it's too complicated and the learning curve is too harsh, you won't want to do that.
Yeah.
As opposed to in the real world, where if there's a learning curve to the game, you might have other reasons to continue playing that game and wanting to get better.
Yeah.
Now, that said, you also can't have a game that is too stagnant, right? You've got to build that, ability for there to be strategic depth to a certain extent, or the player won't want to keep playing it. They will master it too quickly. Games. What a challenge. I did think with Queen's Blood that it was interesting that in the same Kotaku interview where they talked about Splatoon, they were like, so there is a point in kind of the main story where Queen's Blood comes into play. There's a tournament.
You can skip it though if you want to.
Sure. Yes. But it's, you would really have to choose that.
Yes.
And it was interesting that the this director Naoki Hamaguchi, who said actually that was handled by a different team.
Oh, is it just like the main story part, or do they mean like the story that happens if you go through all the Queen's Blood opponents?
So he says, you may be surprised to learn that the minigames team, which was responsible for creating the rules of the Queen's Blood card game and its development, and the levels team, which added a story layer to the minigame and incorporated it into the overall world of the game, operated separately. So yes, I think he's saying that in addition to its appearance in the main story as a, well, yes, you could skip this, but you're not really supposed to thing, and also the unhinged Queen's Blood side quest stuff, were not tied together.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, actually.
Sure. I also read this article, and I think this would be true about any of these card games, and we'll talk about Gwent in a minute. I know the Gwent fans are waiting, but there was an article on Medium about Queen's Blood specifically and the potential of machine learning for that, which
it was talking. It's like the people who make chess bots.
Yeah. And I think you're right to call out that it wouldn't be fun.
Because, as I said, the trying to make an AI opponent that learns to you sort of undercuts the point of these mini games, right? They're almost kind of like puzzles.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, like a boss.
Yep.
In the same way, you're supposed to get used to the way that they attack and come up with your countermeasures. They aren't supposed to change the way they play. And also, in some ways, it was saying oh, it could develop different play styles, which yeah, but it's still not having a personality in it. You get someone, if someone has mostly destroy cards, is that optimal? Probably not. But that tells you about their personality.
Yeah.
And also it's scary the first time that it's introduced, because you're like, what's happening? My deck isn't actually suited for this at all.
Yeah.
And so it just feels like it's yeah, you could do that, just like you could make a bot that plays chess, but what's the point?
Well, especially in games like this where chess is deep enough that we have been playing it for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we can assume that any of these games are deep enough for that, such that it's fun to play a mostly all-knowing bot.
Yeah.
Anyway, to circle back, the game that Emma actually thought was too complicated and that is broadly thought to be too complicated and bad is Tetramaster, which is from Final Fantasy IX, which basically takes Triple Triad and makes it worse.
Yeah.
But, they can't all be hits.
I mean, it sounds like it makes it bigger and adds more stats and adds some, luck elements, too. And it's no, that's too much.
Sometimes
Too much
less is more.
there. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Gwent.
Sure.
I mean, can't talk about card games and games without talking about Gwent. Gwent is the card game from The Witcher 3. So in previous Witchers, Geralt would play like dice poker, basically. But for 3, some wild guys on the CD Projekt Red team were like, what if we did something cool? And there's a bunch of, because Gwent is so popular, there are a bunch of interviews about the development of it. But basically, one of the members of the team, his first name I need to look up here, Damien Monnier, probably, I don't know, who knows, very European, had the idea for this like card game and went to his boss, and the boss was like, these things can't be more than 10 minutes long. It's got to be simple but not too simple, and you got to get me a prototype in 3 days. And if you and your buddy who you've pulled into this can't do that, we're not doing it. And they did it, and he was like, oh, this is good. You can do this, but I'm not going to give you a team. And so basically it's, and you know, there are a lot of like things sprinkled into these interviews that's like, crunch culture at CD Projekt Red might not be so good, huh?
Yeah.
But we'll ignore that. So it basically turned out that they would get anyone who had the skill they needed to do it. So they were like, oh, it was someone in the marketing department who did some of the designs. And we had one QA guy who sat next to one of our desks who really liked it. I just made him play the game a bunch and see what he thought about the AI. And someone wrote the flavor text for all of it too that was like not, I can't remember what it was, but it was like, oh, that wasn't someone who you'd think would write that. Mm-hmm. So it was all like people doing it in their spare time. And then they were very validated when everybody loved it. But yes, a few things sprinkled in these interviews that was like, oh yeah, and then a few like big 12-hour days working on this. And I was like, oh, okay. But the PC Gamer article on this in particular had some like interesting tidbits about particularly designing how the enemies work in games like this, and both how some of that works, how it can be really challenging to QA stuff like this that I found really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was reading the excerpt of like you would get QA tickets where it's like this is too hard versus other QA was like this is too easy, which I do imagine is something that comes up in any sort of like your like in battle systems.
Yeah.
Too. Although this might be more complicated because you probably have more variables than in a combat encounter.
Right.
But yes, it is funny to think about like yeah, like how do you balance an opponent's skill level so that it's falling within some agreed upon area of difficulty for anyone who plays it.
And they spoke a little too about how, so that was one challenge for QA, right? Is that people will bring different play styles. And so it can be hard to determine, is this actually too hard? Or is this one tester just using the all offensive build deck?
Yeah.
Right? But then they also, Gwent, which is not a game that I have actually played, right? But it's also a like, you're taking territory on the board and racking up points kind of game. 2 armies battling against each other and like knocking out cards and whatever. So all of these successful games are really like to some extent the same game with like slightly different rule sets. Right? They're all kind of the same overall.
Well, I did read a couple of articles on just designing card games in general. And there was one from ducksauce.games. There's a blog. That essentially just summed it up as like, for most card games, the question that the player should be asking is, what's the best card from my selection right now? And so in like a very simple card game where you're like, oh, I want to have more than my opponent, right? The answer is probably pretty obvious.
Yeah. Play the highest card.
Play the highest card. And in a more fun and engaging card game, you want to introduce methods where what is the best card varies a lot and shifts depending on the state of play. So that you can have a variety of styles and also require the player to continue thinking strategically rather than falling into like autopilot, right?
Yeah.
But without complete decision paralysis at the same time. And so there's balances like, you add certain rules for when you can play cards or when you should play cards. You add, some sort of resources where if it's a stronger card, maybe it's harder to play in another way. And its summary was essentially like, every card that you can have should belong in some decks, but you shouldn't have a card that belongs in every deck. Which is not entirely true if you have things like resource cards or, alteration cards, but in terms of like your main selections,
I also think it's probably not entirely true of some of these video game deck builder. Like, there are definitely cards that you get at the beginning of some of these games that it's like, well, yeah, like theoretically this belongs in my beginner deck because of the scaffolding, but like if I were actually designing a card game, would I have a card that's this bad? Like, maybe not.
Sure.
But one of the ways, right, in which it can vary about what card is best to play is if you are playing a game in which bluffing is part of what you're doing, right? So, like, for instance, really in neither of the big Final Fantasy games are really bluffing games.
No.
You have a big enough deck and limited enough card spaces that it's not really, you're not trying to fool your opponent into using a card in a stupid way, right? You're just trying to win. Whereas Gwent is a game that does involve some bluffing mechanics, which evidently made it quite, and which is probably why it's popular as a game for human beings to play against each other too, right? Yeah. But that apparently made it quite challenging to, well, one, you have to think about, okay, how is the AI bluffing or utilizing bluffing, right? And so they said basically the way they handled that is, or one of the ways they handled that is thinking about, okay, how far ahead can it think, right? Maybe an easy robot opponent can only really simulate one turn ahead, right? But if you're playing something smarter, maybe you can think about a few turns ahead what you might do and what it might do, and that allows it to make like smarter or more interesting plays, right?
Yeah.
So that was a cool peek behind the curtain for me of how these things might work, right? Is like thinking about, yes, because when you human being are playing a card, you are probably thinking, okay, I am doing this with the idea that my opponent will do that, and then I will play this card, right? Yeah. Or if you're really good, you might even go a level beyond that, right? But apparently, because when a player, or in this case, a robot, is bluffing, right, you can't tell if... It's hard from a QA perspective to understand, oh, has the computer done something that it's like bluffing and so it's working the way that it should? Or has your opponent done something dumb that we need to fix in the AI? Right? Yeah. Did it play that high card in that place because, as they say, dummying its highest value card so it could scorch a whole row of our cards the next turn? Or did it play that high value card in that dumb place because there's like, we need to tweak the programming? That sounds, it's interesting to think about that challenge, because they said we could not always determine why, like we couldn't ask the robot why it did that. So we just had to keep testing it to see if it acted the way it should.
Yeah, I do wonder how many times QA had to like try to play the exact same game against the computer.
Probably a lot.
For example. Yeah.
But yes, Gwent, super, super popular. People loved it in The Witcher 3. It has its own standalone game that they really like just wound down development on maybe a year or two ago. Basically because they said, we can't think of any more cards, so don't expect any more cards from us. There was one Reddit thread that I thought was funny. So Gwent gets its name, you forget this because The Witcher is so big as a game now, but it's based on a series of books, right? And so the name Gwent comes from Gwent, which in like the original Polish of the books or whatever is the name of some kind of like dwarven card game. But somebody on Reddit was like, in canon, who invented this game and like how is there a card with Geralt's face on it? Because there are like powerful hero cards in the game, right, that you can get that are actually the big main characters.
Yes. They have that in Queen's Blood too.
Yes, of course. And so a helpful Redditor was like, actually, in canon, and I don't know, maybe this isn't true in the video game canon, but this person's like, in canon, Gwent is not the game that you're playing, right? In the books we see it's like dwarves playing a bunch of stuff together at the same time. So it's interesting also on top of all of this to consider like, oh, I'm playing this game, but like, what is my character playing?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to imagine that Geralt or Cloud or whatever is playing and does it look like this?
Yeah. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Cold Steel has a card game.
Boo.
It has 2 card games.
Boo. No, sorry, go on.
I did not get okay, so the first game it introduces features in Cold Steel 1 and 2 is called Blade, which is essentially kind of like a more complicated version of War, kind of.
Sure.
Where you have attacks and defends, and you're supposed to get rid of all of your opponent's cards first. So I guess it's reverse War in that way.
Peace.
Yes, it's peace. I think you're supposed to have cards left at the end.
Uh-huh.
I did like Blade because Blade was pretty simple to understand. And even when you ran into a tough opponent, you could kind of figure out what you were supposed to do. It didn't have as much of like a deck building element, essentially. Yeah. It was like you had a deck and that's the deck you were sort of using. And then in Cold Steel 3, 4, and Reverie, there's Vantage Masters, which is a card deck building game where you have like your leader card and then you pull things from your deck and you have a certain amount of points per turn that goes up as the game continues, and different cards are different point values, and then on each turn you do attacks on what your opponent has played. And typically in those 3 games, I would start playing Vantage Masters and then hit like the second or third like wall opponent that's meant to be like, this is supposed to challenge you. Right. And be like, actually, I'm
done. Yeah.
I'm done now. I don't want to make another deck to figure this out. Actually, I'm going to play Pom Pom Party on my phone.
Which is valid. Not all, a good mini game like this, the player will filter themselves out when they've had enough.
Yes. But on a meta level, I was thinking when Reen was a student, he was really into playing cards, right?
Yeah.
That was sick. They had an emotional connection to playing cards. And then, by 3, he's a working adult now. That guy who introduced him to Blade is dead. Maybe he's not as into Vantage Masters. Maybe he just wants to play match 3 games on his phone, like any respectable working adult. So that just makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just playing per the canon.
Sure. I feel like I am owed a better card game in Like a Dragon.
Yeah.
Mezuking.
Maybe you should learn how to do like Hanafuda or Koi Koi or one of those games.
You're right. I understand there are card games. I am owed a better fake card game. Mezza King sucks.
Mezza King doesn't really count as a card game,
I know.
honestly. I know you pick up cards,
Yeah.
but then it's an arcade game that's just rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
So it's not really a card game.
And thank God for that. A few other card games that people love to shout out here. Knights of the Old Republic has Pazak, which is like basically blackjack with some added complications to it. There's a decent like quality like category of these that are like, it's like this game that exists, but it's a little different, right? If many of the big famous ones are like, it's a strategy battle game with cards and points. There's also a category that's, this feels like a game that exists.
Yeah.
Then Fallout New Vegas has Caravan, which is kind of like, it's not solitaire, right? But it's like, it's a card stacking where you have ways that you are allowed to stack cards in 3 piles to get as many points as you can. And then Genshin Impact has Genius Invocation, which it feels crazy to me to have like a collectathon game within a gacha game, but why not?
A couple more. The Voice of Cards games, in addition to being aesthetically card-based.
Are they making more of those? I had forgotten about your
No.
intense Voice of Cards phase.
They have not said they're making it. Yoko Taro is making a new Evangelion.
I think you mean that he's making the next Nier Automata.
It did say to be continued, but I do mean he's making a new Evangelion.
I know, but maybe they're the same.
I mean, he was mostly the producer on Voice of Cards, I believe. But no, they seem to have made 3, and that was the deal.
That's all the cards had to say.
Which is too bad, because they were very good morning games.
I remember.
I very much liked them. But anyway, in addition to being aesthetically card-themed, there is, at least, I think it's in all of them, but mostly featured in the first one, like a pair-making card minigame.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, you have your deck, and then there's a certain amount of cards in the middle, and you're supposed to, like, pick ones to make pairs, you know, in a certain order. There's more to it than that, but that's essentially what it was. Reasonably fun. They don't introduce new cards, but they do add rules as you go to make it more complicated. And then Persona 5 Royal apparently has a version of Tycoon, which is a real card game, which is you're supposed to get rid of your cards as fast as possible. This is like I feel like this is like similar to a game that I definitely played at camp a lot, where you go, essentially like you go up in numbers. But in this, you have to play, like, the same amount that the person before you played.
Gotcha.
And I don't know if there's a bluffing element. I don't think so.
Mm.
But you go in rounds, and whoever gets rid of their cards first is the tycoon, and then, like, the rich person, the poor person, and the beggar.
That's the part that sounded familiar to me. I was like, oh, I kind of remember that.
Yeah, and then you get points based on where you are, and you do another round. And so the one in Persona 5 Royal is essentially the same, except for there's a few house rules that make it different. Like, certain numbers do special things. There's a couple more jokers in play. Haha. And other things like that. I didn't know it had a card game until I looked it up for this episode, actually.
The high schoolers love card games.
It's exclusive to Royal. It's not in the base game.
I know, I would have found
itself. Yeah.
So that brings me back to poker in Red Dead, which it raised the interesting. So, you know, you play poker. We know what poker is. But like I said, and this feels very like in the world of what Red Dead is and the character of, you know, those games. But you are able to cheat in poker in Red Dead Redemption, which made me think of when I am playing Triple Triad or when I am playing Gwent or whatever, right? Am I playing as Geralt, or have I stepped into another dimension where I am playing as me, right? Like, for the most part, these games exist in sort of a separate I'm not actually looking at a table when I'm playing these. I'm not seeing what my character would see, probably. I don't know. Queen's Blood, maybe Chadley has pushed me into another dimension, right? But
probably. Yeah.
I'm
No, you've just entered like first person mode,
Sure. I just mean I'm seeing something that's not necessarily like what I would see if I were playing this. And it did make me consider cheating in cards is like a fundamental part of what playing cards is in a physical space with people. And sometimes unintentionally, right? We've all played the game with the person who's like throwing their cards around. And you're like, oh my God, I don't want to see your entire hand. Right? I just want to play. So it's interesting how much work these games can do to set up the world building and the character development in of the world, while at the same time existing in such a separate space from what you're doing in the game.
Well, in terms of cheating, like it's different cheating in poker versus cheating in like Magic the Gathering.
Sure.
Like cheating in Magic the Gathering is more like, oops, you used an illegal card.
Yeah.
Like, this card is banned from competition. And that would be a funny world building detail to add.
Yeah.
Is you have a card for a while and then the rules get updated and it's like, actually, no. The ghost that designed this game is like, that card's overpowered. It's
you play Ifrit and the game immediately ends.
Yeah. And cheating in something like poker, it's essentially the difference between the games where everybody can see you have to show your card per turn,
right,
versus ones where you don't show your cards. You're holding your deck,
yeah.
Right? I guess you could cheat by being like, I swap out one card with another in other games too, which is essentially what you do in poker. But it still feels a little different,
Yeah. Anyway, it was interesting for me to consider, like, oh, what would that look like if we introduced more of those mechanics? Anyway, to bring us towards a close here, consider me in favor of there being more weird little card games in games. I like to get into these kinds of mini games in this way.
I would like more match 3 games, please.
All right, whatever. A card game that's also a match 3 game.
That's probably real.
Sushi Go?
No.
I know.
Well, I guess one of them you are supposed to match 3, but that's not.
Right.
It's not really.
Well, listeners, did we miss any of your favorite video game card games? Did you tune into this wishing that we were going to talk about Balatro? Sorry, me too. Just kidding. I can't think about Balatro. That deck, by the way, if anybody wants to get me the Balatro card deck, that'd be cool. That's cool. That's cool that exists, even though that game is not about playing actual cards at all, and you can't get an official triple triad deck. Crazy. Who likes to make money and who doesn't? Listeners, do you want to stand up for Tetra Flash? What is it? Tetra Mashup? Tetra Mecha? Tetra... I'm scrolling. Tetra Master. What's your favorite? Should Emma and I get into Gwent? Which song from one of these card games do you now have stuck in your head? If you have thoughts about this or anything that we talked about this week, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Blue Sky at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog. But most importantly, if you enjoy the show, you ought to subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Go ahead and subscribe to Talk This so you never miss an episode on Sundays at noon. Next week, we're talking about some games. We're talking about an old game, and we're talking about a new game.
Our old game was Monaco, and our new game was Firebreak, I believe.
I trust you on that. So look forward to that in 1 week, and then to Emma's side quest in 2 weeks.
Yep.
That's pretty much what we got this week. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Talk This. Emma, sign us off.
This week, this won't work because we have outro music, but I wish you a very banana.